So, crush any rock. It doesn't really matter what kind of rock, it doesn't really matter how many pieces or how big the pieces are. You just crush them into pieces, mix them all together, maybe you add in pieces from another rock. You take them, get them all together, squish them all together. You squish them all together, and boom, you have just made a sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rocks are some of the most common rocks on Earth's surface and some of my personal favorites. Let's find out why on this episode of Rock Talk. So, sedimentary rocks, what exactly are they? Sedimentary rock is any rock that has been broken up into pieces called grains. You've taken those grains and squished them and re-cemented it into a whole new rock. Pretty simple. Sedimentary rocks are put into categories based off of three factors: the size, sorting, and angularity of the grains that make up that rock. Size organizes the grains of a sedimentary rock very simply based off of how big those individual grains are. Grain size goes all the way from clay, which is the smallest possible clay size you can have, almost microscopic. You can't see a clay grain with your naked eye. It's that small. It goes all the way up through silt, sand, pebbles, cobbles, all the way up to boulders! Now, geologists, we're pretty lazy, so we name sedimentary rocks based off of the general kinds of grains that are in that rock. Silt, stone. Clay, stone. Sand, stone. It's pretty easy. Sorting describes how organized the grains are within that rock. So for example, if you have a rock that has a bunch of small grains and a bunch of really big grains in the same rock, then that's a very poorly sorted rock. If a sedimentary rock has grains that are all the same exact size, then that is a very well sorted rock. The grain sorting, like grain size, exists on a spectrum. You can have everything from very well sorted, moderately sorted, poorly sorted, and very poorly sorted. Like that. Next is the grain angularity, which describes how rounded the grains are in a sedimentary rock. You can have grains that are more rounded, which means they're going to be smooth, in some cases almost spherical, and you have other grains that appear jagged, broken, very angular. Like grain size, grain sorting, and gender, angularity exists on a spectrum. So these three factors combine to tell us a lot about the depositional system that formed these rocks, or simply how those grains got deposited in the first place. First is grain size, and the size of the grains in a sedimentary rock tell us about the depositional system that formed that rock, or the location that the grains came from. So a rock with very big grains in it means that it could only have been deposited in a very high energy system, like a river. A river is going to push all except the biggest and heaviest sized grains out of that river, and only deposited the ones that are so heavy and so big that they can't be pushed by the river anymore. So they fall out and they end up forming a rock. On the other hand, a system like a delta, very slow moving water, or wind-swept dunes are going to be so low energy that they can only push the very smallest grains into that system, and that's what's going to form those kinds of rocks. Next is sorting, and sorting tells us how far those grains traveled before forming that rock. Grains that are well sorted likely traveled a very long distance before forming that rock, while grains that are poorly sorted likely didn't come very far from where they were originally formed. The farther they get, the more sorted those grains are going to be. Lastly is the angularity of the rocks, which also indicates how far those grains traveled before they were deposited. A landslide is just going to break a bunch of rocks and put them in a big pile. In that rock, you're going to be able to see very sharp, well-defined edges where those rocks were broken. But in a river, those rocks are going to be tumbled, they're going to be brushing up against each other, they're going to be scoured by the river, the water itself, and over time will get more and more rounded, and those sharp edges are going to disappear, leaving only the most well-rounded rocks once you get far enough away. So now that we kind of have these concepts, let's apply what we've learned to a real-world rock. So if you take a look right here, penny for scale, right there, penny for scale, you can see that this sedimentary rock has a lot of tiny little grains. So it's going to be it looks like it's a pretty well sorted rock. Most of these grains are the same size. And since most of these grains are sand in size, it's a sandstone. So that's pretty awesome. But what else can we tell about this rock? If you look a little closer, we can see that the grains in this rock are pretty well rounded, including this one right here. This one's sticking out. Now this one is a little bigger than all the surrounding sand grains, which is telling us that this sandstone isn't super well sorted. It's really well sorted. Most of the grains, the sand grains in here are well sorted, but not extremely well sorted. So, all in all, it is a sandstone with well-rounded grains, moderate to well sorting. I'd say it's probably pretty well sorted, but not extremely well sorted. And so that's telling us that we have a kind of mid-energy and probably low-energy system. It's going to be a really low-energy system that is depositing these grains. It's not like extremely low energy like a delta, but it's probably a pretty low-energy stream or river bank bar that's depositing these rocks. Pretty cool. Sedimentary rocks are absolutely amazing rocks that detail the passage of rivers, the deposition of lakes, and the rise and fall of oceans, which is why it's one of my personal favorite rocks. While it can be complicated sometimes, just remember, rock stars, it's all just sedimentary. Thanks for joining me on this episode. Feel free to let me know in the comments some awesome sedimentary rocks that you've seen in your travels. Feel free to post some pictures as well, because I love seeing rock pics, and I'll catch you next time. Oh, and as always, remember to smash that subscribe button. Catch you next week.